Test, test. Test, test, test.
So welcome everybody. Has everyone been to one of these before? How many are new to speaker series? Welcome. So we've been doing these monthly for about 5 years, and delighted to be here. We had a little bit of a break during COVID and did them virtually, but we're back live. And Pelican Harbor, for those of you that don't know, has been here for almost 24 years? No, 44.
43 years.
Am I mad?
44 years.
Yeah. Skills are failing. Since 1980. We're based just down the parking lot in a little 950 square foot building. And we treat over 2,000 animals every year of 150 different species. So it's pretty incredible. We're Miami's premier native wildlife hospital. We also have about 75, 80 volunteers that are on a rotational basis. And we have a very robust education department. So we really have a dual mission. We treat animals, but also we do a lot of education events. So thrilled to have all of you here. And I will next turn it over to Christopher Boykin, who I'm sure you all know and love.
Thanks, Lily. Real quick, shout out to Troy, who was our speaker last month on snakes. He brought 2 live snakes in the room. Very, very cool. I missed it, but I love snakes. Great work. Lots of respect, Troy. Thank you. Most of you know that this is my last night at the speaker series. After 90 plus years, I'm moving to work with the Miami Waterkeeper. So my last day is Friday. But I have so much love in my heart for this organization and everyone here and all of you for coming and caring about the Everglades and birds and wildlife. And as Troy alluded to, a very, very magical place, the Everglades, the second largest freshwater wetland in the world. And it's one of the things that makes Miami so special, that and the coral reef and the diverse people and food and the Magic City, hello, and the Keys, and the Bahamas. So a lot of things to love about where we live. I had the great pleasure and privilege of being a leadership in Miami 44, Begoñe and one David Paoli. And this was last year. We were in LN 44 in Miami's Tomorrow, and it was an excellent, amazing 6-month course. And our team was Miami Tomorrow, and one David is actually doing the solar at our new facility. So do you have any solar needs? Paoli Solar, they're great, they're good.
Any green?
Very green. So Begoñe Cazalis is the communications director of one of the most respected nonprofits in this county and in the state, the Everglades Foundation. And tonight, she is going to give us a summary, a discourse on Everglades Restoration 101. At Pelican Harbor, we restore and heal the birds. They are working to help the state and federal government and others restore and heal one of the most important ecosystems on planet Earth. And thank you so much. We're looking forward to hearing from you, Begoñe.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. All right. Can you guys see? Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, well, thank you. We are gonna talk a little bit about what I call Everglades Restoration 101. So some of you might know a little bit more about this. Some of you might know a little bit less. So I'll try to keep it general, and then we can go a little bit more in depth in the questions. But a lot of times people live in Miami all their lives and they've never been to the Everglades. They've never heard about Everglades restoration. They don't understand what it is. And it's very important, it's critical that we understand what Everglades restoration is and how it impacts us here every day. So Everglades restoration is the largest ecosystem restoration project in the world. This is a model. As we restore one of the largest wetlands in the world, this is going to be a model of how ecosystem restoration can work, not only here in the United States, but around the world. All eyes are on us with this large project. But before we go into understanding what is Everglades restoration, we really need to understand what is the Everglades. What is this amazing ecosystem that we have the privilege of having right here next to us in South Florida? And I say it's a privilege not only because of the 2,000 plus species of plants and animals that it has, not only because it's the largest subtropical wetland in the United States, one of the largest mangrove forests in the world, but also, and not only because it's beautiful, because it's a beautiful place to visit, but also because of all of the benefits that it provides to us, all of the resources that it gives us. So the Everglades sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. It's a carbon sink. It also helps protect us against storms, against flooding. It's an economic engine that supports fishing, recreation, boating, tourism, and real estate here in South Florida, all of the most important industries in our state. But the most important thing that the Everglades gives us is water. And it's the water that we use every single day right here in Miami-Dade County. The water that we drink, that we wash our dishes with, that we brush our teeth with, and that we use every day, not only in our homes, but also in our businesses. The Everglades provides fresh water to about 9 million Floridians. That is 42% of the state of Florida. And all of our drinking water here in Miami-Dade, all in Broward, and in Monroe County in the Keys comes from the Everglades. The Everglades recharges the Biscayne Aquifer, which is basically an underground river that's right under our feet all through Miami-Dade County. There's a porous limestone rock bed that is right under the Everglades that acts as a sponge. The wetlands keep the water that comes from the rain or that is coming down through the Everglades, and it trickles it down through the limestone, helps filter it, and it goes down and recharges the Biscayne Aquifer. That means that when the Everglades have enough water, our aquifer has enough water. Municipalities like Miami-Dade County, Broward, some of them cities, use wells to pull the water from the Biscayne Aquifer from underground. They treat that water, and then they send it to our homes via pipes. And that's kind of how it works. And now we have to understand a little bit how the Everglades used to work. The Everglades we have today are very, very different than the Everglades that were here before all of us came here and moved to South Florida. So it used to be one continuous river that started all the way up in Orlando in the Kissimmee River chain. It would spill right into Lake Okeechobee, which would spill slowly into the Everglades, recharging the wetlands with fresh water. All of this was one continuous river, the River of Brass. And that water will travel all the way through the Everglades, and then it would feed the Florida Bay right here down in the Keys with the fresh water it needs for that specific habitat where you need salt water and fresh water. This is how the Everglades used to look. Basically, it was about half the state of Florida. Today, the Everglades are a third of what it used to be. This is kind of like how the typical Everglades landscape, a healthy Everglades landscape, would look from above. This is the typical sheet flow. And as you can see, the teardrop shows you the movement of the water going south, which is why it has kind of shaped the vegetation that way. And the Everglades has about 8 or 9 habitats in there, diverse habitats. So maybe who from here can help me identify some of them? This, and I have some swag if you can name them. I have your water comes from the Everglades bottle and a hat. Okay, yes, back there. A hammock, there you go. Correct, this is a hardwood hammock, and you can recognize it for the dense canopy that you will go on there, and it's really hard to get through. So she gets the bottle. Okay, fun.
I see mangroves and I see cypress.
There you go, 2. All right, you got an Everglades Foundation hat. So we have the mangroves right here, which are very, very important for our ecosystem. They are, we call them the superheroes of the seashore. They help collect a lot of carbon. They help protect us from storms. They have so many resources for us. And this is what has fresh water and salt water. And then here, I want to also mention the cypress. This is what we call the cypress swamp. It's basically a wet forest, you know, and these are the cypresses, the bold cypresses that you'll recognize from the Everglades. Anybody else? What about these ones? What are these trees here? Pineland, correct. So this is the rockland pine or the pineland. These are the highest elevation in the Everglades. They tend to be drier. If you get to go to Everglades National Park, I recommend that you go visit the pineland and you can really see it. You can see the limestone under them. It's very interesting. This is, you know, the estuaries, the seagrass. So this is the Florida Bay. This is where the fresh water meets the salt water. You have it in the Florida Bay and in some of the east and west coast. And this is kind of like the sawgrass marsh. You know, this is the typical habitat that you'll see when you take an airboat ride. So it has all these things to offer. And all of these habitats are interconnected. And they all benefit from restoration. And all of the wildlife that lives in these habitats also benefits from restoration, from having that continuous flow of fresh water that today is not really there. So what happened? Why is the river grass no longer how it used to be? So in the beginning of the 20th century, as people started moving to Florida, there was a campaign to drain the Everglades. Everybody wanted to drain the Everglades. Has anybody heard of Napoleon Brower? Not the Everglades Foundation ladies. So yes, that's after who Broward County is named. Napoleon Brower was running for governor of Florida, and his whole campaign was draining the Everglades. Everybody came and was trying to channelize and drain the Everglades so that people could move in here, so that we could build farms, we could build roads, we could build the cities where we live. You know, all of it was the Everglades. It was all wet, except a little bit on the coastline. So they were trying to drain the Everglades, and it proved to be harder than they thought. They brought these giant machines. It didn't really work. They used different techniques. They brought in exotic trees that help dry the land, like Melaleuca or Brazilian pepper, which now are a problem because they're invasive species, but they're really good about drying the land. And they did all these things to disrupt the ecosystem. They didn't really know what the impact was going to be today. They didn't really understand that that was going to be the fresh water that we were all going to be using. And also, a lot less people lived in South Florida until not that long ago, right? Today, we keep on growing, people keep on moving to Florida, so we need to make sure that we have that fresh water. So this is what we have today. These are the altered Everglades. It's been channelized, it's been compartmentalized. A dike was built around Lake Okeechobee because there was a lot of flooding. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the famous book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. They usually make you read it in high school here in Florida, and it's about a big flood that happened after a hurricane, and Lake Okeechobee spilled the water and flooded, and a lot of people died. So after that, the Army Corps of Engineers actually built a dike around Lake Okeechobee, which was the one thing that finished kind of cutting off that freshwater flow that used to exist. Then we have farming. All of this down here is agriculture land, mainly sugar farming that has been there for decades. And then since the water couldn't go south anymore, they created canals to the east and the west so that they could dump that fresh water whenever the lake would rise too high. And that's still what happens today. So today, the fresh water is cut off. The Everglades are not getting enough fresh water, and what we're doing is we're dumping the water to the east and to the west. Now you notice the arrows here are brown, and it's because that water, it's polluted. And those alterations have created major issues, major impacts that we're still living with today. It's a problem of water quality and of water quantity. So water quality, we have an issue here in the east and the west coast, in Stewart, Fort Myers, and Naples, because whenever the lake rises too high, the water needs to be dumped to the east and to the west through these canals to the St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee River. But that water is polluted. It has a lot of blue-green algae that comes from phosphorus and nitrogen pollution, primarily from the sugar plantations that are south of the lake in the Everglades agricultural area. And to the south, we have a different problem. We don't have enough water. So the east and west are getting a lot of water, but it's water that hasn't been treated yet. And the south, we're not getting enough water. So what happens is that the Everglades, during the dry season, if it gets too dry, they're more prone to fires. And then all the way down here in the Florida Bay, they're not getting any fresh water because that's been cut off. So they have other issues. They have issues of hypersalinity because the estuaries in Florida Bay need a balance of fresh water and salt water. So they're not getting enough fresh water, and then you have seagrass die-offs, you have manatees that die, you have fish kills, and we've experienced all of these things, all of this toxic blue green algae, red tide on the West Coast, you know, hypersalinity on Florida Bay in the last few years. You know, there was a terrible, what we call the lost summer of 2016, 2017. And then in Florida Bay, we've had major seagrass die-offs. And to this day, you talk to anglers in the Keys, which we do all the time, and they are still experiencing how it's changed. There used to be a lot more fishing, a lot healthier Florida Bay, and now it doesn't have enough fresh water. So it's been affecting not only the environment, but the economy there, because there's less people going there to fish. It affects recreation, it affects fishing guides, anglers. And actually, in the Florida Bay is where the Everglades Foundation started. 30 years ago, last year was our 30th anniversary, two fishing buddies, George Farley and Paul Tudor Jones, they used to love going fishing in Islamorada in the Florida Bay, and they started realizing that the conditions were changing and that the water had a problem. So they actually brought in scientists to Islamorada, and they asked them, what is going on here? How can we clean this water? And the scientists told them, well, your problem's not here. Your problem's all the way in Lake Okeechobee. This is a holistic problem that is affecting the whole state. It's not only down here, it's affecting the East Coast, it's affecting the West Coast, and it's killing the Everglades because we don't have enough fresh water. So they decided to create the Everglades Foundation. And the whole idea was to create a science-based organization in which they could study this issue, they could understand what was happening, and take that science and do advocacy with it, make a change, actually fix the problem. Today, we also have an education department. We have Bianca here from our education department if anybody has any questions, because we realized that people in Florida didn't know this issue. They didn't even know about the Everglades. We realized that kids could name animals in Africa and in the North Pole, but they couldn't name the animals in their backyard. So what if the people who are the elected officials today would have learned about this in school? Maybe we would have had an easier time kind of fixing all these issues, right? So it's been this year's our 10th anniversary of our education department, and what we do is that we train teachers all across the state of Florida, and we give them free resources into how to teach about the Everglades, how to talk about the Everglades, so that our future elected officials, our future scientists can learn about the importance of this amazing ecosystem. You know, we do advocacy, we take the science, we do advocacy, and then through our science team, we also have a lot of scientific programs to invest in the next generation of researchers, of graduate students who are going to be talking about the Everglades. And actually, Chloe is here. She was a for Everglades scholar for a few years in a row, studying the economics of clean water and of restoration. So that's also investing in that next generation because it's not only restoring it now, but it's also how are we going to protect it in the future. And through that advocacy of the Everglades Foundation and of many other organizations and individuals who dedicated their lives to this, in 2000, 7 years after the foundation got founded, we were able to pass the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. It was signed in 2000 by President Bill Clinton. It was the last act that he signed. And it was in partnership with the state of Florida. At that moment, it was actually Governor Jeb Bush here in Florida. It was an alliance to solve this crisis between the state of Florida and the federal government. And to this day, Everglades restoration projects are paid 50% by the state of Florida and 50% by the federal government. SERP is 68 projects all over the state, as you can see, all over South Florida and the Everglades watershed, to try to fix this problem, to try to restore as much as possible the water flow of the River of Grass. And it requires political and public support, because even though this was signed into by Congress, every year we have to go and ask for the money to fund these projects. We have to go to Washington and we have to go to Tallahassee to ensure that it gets funded. And for many, many years, we weren't having any luck. You know, there was the economic downturn. There was this other thing, you know, other projects, other states are competing for these funds as well. So recently, in the past, you know, 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of support, because we need to fix this. If we don't fix this, we're just not gonna have enough fresh water for Miami to keep on growing. And Miami, South Florida, is way too important for the state of Florida and even for the nation to not have enough fresh water. So it's been incredible bipartisan support lately, incredible support from the state, from the federal government, from the Biden administration, from the DeSantis administration, and we have to continue that momentum, because these projects need to get built, and the longer we take, the bigger the consequences are going to be. And really, we're in a race against climate change as well. You know, so these projects are important to protect our water supply in the face of sea level rise, in the face of many things changing, and in the face of many more people moving here to Florida. So this is what a restored Everglades would look like. You know, we're never going to have the historic flow of water. But as you can see, we're going to have a lot more fresh water coming in once all these projects are in place. A lot more fresh water coming into Florida Bay, and then treatment areas, stormwater treatment areas that can treat the water before they're sent to the east and west coast. And what does restoration look like? What does Everglades restoration look like? It looks like this. It's infrastructure. It's water infrastructure. It is reservoirs to hold the water, stormwater treatment areas, which are basically man-made wetlands, to clean the water, and canals and pump stations to send that water where it needs to go at the right time. One of the projects you might be familiar with is the Miami Trail bridges. If you ever go west Calle Ocho, all the way past the Miccosukee Casino on Chrome and Southwest A Street, you will go over the Miami Trail bridges that are there now. Maybe some of you might remember when those bridges were in there, and that was just the Miami Trail Road. That road used to get flooded. When that road was created around the 1940s, it was an engineering success. It was going to connect Tampa to Miami. That's why it's called Miami, connecting the east and the west. But that road effectively created a dike for the water. It completely obstructed the passage of water from the Everglades into the Taylor Slough, which is a very important slough there, blocking the water from getting into Florida Bay. So now, in its place, the road was removed, and there are 3 miles of bridges in Miami Trail where the water can go under. And we're already seeing the benefits. We're already seeing the birds coming back. We're already seeing the wildlife returning. So it's amazing to see how we're fixing the mistakes of the past. You know, it's like, yes, we made these mistakes. We can fix them as well. Another project to highlight is, you know, basically one of the most important, if not the most important project of all of this comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, which is the EAA reservoir, or the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir. February last year, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers broke ground. This is a massive reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee. It's going to be the size of the island of Manhattan. 16,000 acres, 10,000 for the reservoir, and 6,500 of wetlands for cleaning the water. And it's basically going to work like a rain barrel, right? We want to catch that water as it's raining. We want to catch the water as it spills out of Lake Okeechobee, and then we're going to clean it through wetlands before being able to send it south. This is a big deal. It's the largest project that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has ever done. And it took a lot to be able to get here. There's a lot of states that want these funds for their own projects. It took a lot of work, a lot of advocacy, a lot of being in their faces, you know, with the science, support, public support, bringing in anglers, realtors, different industries, the recreation industry, making sure that everybody's united behind this so that we can get the necessary funding. And then here you can see exactly in the map where it is. The Herbert Hoover dike, which was the dike that was built, has been rehabilitated. It was strengthened after Katrina, and a lot of these dikes were fixed, which now allows for the lake to go a little higher and not have to dump water to the east and west. Here's where the reservoir is going to be. This is the agricultural area where you can see a lot of the sugar farming there. And then just here, because it's Miami-Dade County, we also have flood control, right? So we want water to flow, but we don't want it to flow everywhere because we have people living here in our urban areas. So there's a seepage wall that the South Florida Water Management District built, which is basically an underground wall to kind of keep the water inside the park, inside the water conservation areas where it has to go. So it's just interesting infrastructure to get all of this to happen. And so here we are. Again, it's never going to look like this. We all live here now, so we can't have all that water. This is where we are right now, and this is where we want to go. And it's very important because it's all about the water, because it's the water that we end up using every day. This is just a reminder and to show you, you know, the year before last, we did a survey in Miami-Dade County and Broward to see if people knew that the Everglades provides us with our fresh water, and 95% of the residents of Miami-Dade County and Broward County didn't know that their water comes from the Everglades. So we felt like we needed to start from ground zero. Like, how can we talk to people about restoration if they don't even understand how they are connected to this ecosystem, how their livelihood depends on it? So we started an educational campaign that's been very successful, and hopefully that number has changed now. You know, Miami, your water comes from the Everglades. Nuestra agua viene de los Everglades. In Creole, in every language, everybody needs to know why is it that we're connected to the Everglades every single day, every time that we open the faucet. And you know, that's all. A lot of times people ask me, how can I help? How can we make sure that this continues to happen? Learn, you know, like this was a great first step. Now you have done your Everglades Restoration 101, you understand what's at stake, you understand what's happening. You can subscribe to our newsletter by scanning this, follow us on social media, we're always posting educational things, and then share with others, you know, tell your family, tell your neighbors, and if you talk to your elected representatives, whether it is at the county level, where they have discussions about urban boundary, the urban development boundary, whether it's at the state level where they are deciding how much money is going to be allocated every year to these restoration projects, or if you talk to your congressperson at the federal level, you know, mention this is important to you. You want to make sure that restoration gets done and that you know why it's important. And you know, you can donate, you can stay engaged with us and with other organizations that are working towards this goal. And I will take some questions now.
So, you know, the restoration projects are great. They sound awesome. What are we doing as far as working on the root cause? Like somebody, obviously we can't move on. That's not gonna happen, right? But as far as these factories and companies like the sugar cane, Albilanta, other crystals, what is the interaction that you guys are having with them? Because it almost sounds like the whole cancer thing where these same companies that come upon are the ones that fund the organization. So what kind of interaction is happening there?
We don't have any interaction with the sugar industry. They're kind of like our, you know, the opposite of us. You know, that's what we're trying to clean the water that they polluted. You know, that is up to the government. You know, the standards that they do pay some polluter tax is not nearly what they should be paying for what they use our water as their water, you know, as their own personal water supply. And yeah, we all as taxpayers are paying to clean the water that they have been getting dirty for years and years. And not only that, the sugar industry is also subsidized. There's a whole other issue that you can talk to a lot of different organizations. Agriculturally, there's a farm bill coming up. A lot of people are trying to make sure that they don't get the type of subsidies that they've been getting, which are significant. So, us as taxpayers, we're paying for their pollution and for their business and for their billionaire, industry in many different ways. These stormwater treatment areas are for cleaning the phosphorus and the nitrogen. And yes, there are definitely, people who work towards making sure that they get regulation, and then how do you apply the regulation and all of that. But that's a great question, and people talk about the root and the cause of the problem. We're involved in it as well. But at least we're right now working towards restoring the water. And Chloe, I don't know if there's anything you want to add since you've been studying things around there.
Yeah, I think ag is certainly one of the big stresses, and now development is becoming an even bigger stressor on the Everglades, right? So that might be something I think in the future that ag and Everglades restoration advocates could agree on. It's like, maybe we both need to team up and be like, we should be developing all these places that are vital resources and economic systems for, our native species. So there's a lot of tension.
Yes,
sure.
there is a lot of tension between the
two
sugar industry and us, absolutely. And yes, absolutely, with the agriculture. We also have agriculture here in Miami-Dade County, in Homestead and the Redland. And that is land that when it gets rained on, at least the water is still going into the aquifer, right? Which is why it's like that buffer zone between the Everglades and the urban area. If you pave all over it, that's water that's not going to go through the ground and into the aquifer. Any other questions? Maybe not sugar related. I hope no one's recorded. Yes. Yes.
Sorry to do this to you, but I want to add, as consumers, we can buy organic sugar, which doesn't come from this. Exactly.
Absolutely, and if you want to learn more about it, there's a wealth of information about sugar industry issues and sugar industry practices. There was a few days ago an article in Rolling Stone magazine about cane burning, which is another issue. It's something that's not done in many countries that harvest sugar, and it's still done here in Florida. So not only polluting the water, but also the air. So yes, I invite you to learn more about it and be a educated consumer.
Well, my question is, in terms of invasives, what's going on in terms of pythons and others?
Invasives is a huge problem. It's not only pythons. Pythons have changed the face of the Everglades. I remember going to the Everglades 15 years ago and seeing like marsh rabbits and all these cute little mammals. They're not there anymore. They've all been eaten by pythons. It's very sad. And it's people who purchase pets and then go to the Everglades to release them. And there's other issues. If you go now to Anhinga Trail, they were telling us there's a tilapia infestation in Anhinga Trail because they've escaped through the canals from tilapia farms. So now it's full of tilapias. Here in South Florida, it's a big issue, the invasives. We have iguanas, you see them everywhere. They're creating havoc because it's such a nice weather, so everything grows, and then they don't have any natural predators. The python issue it's a really, really big problem. We have python hunting things that the South Florida Water Management District holds competitions, but it's been impossible because you can't find them. They're training dogs. They're doing infrared light to find them. They grow like crazy. They eat everything, and they lay like hundreds of eggs. So it's yes, especially like in the more central. Yes, they are.
And that's just the animals, even the plants as well. So the invasive plants also change all the habitats that all these species depend on. So there's a lot of issues with the plants as well.
There's a lot of issues, period.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
You don't see Melaleuca trees anymore. Have they kind of gotten rid of most of them? Streets used to be lined with
Yeah, some of them. I mean, there's been a more conscientious effort to have native plants, but you still, if you go west on Southwest A Street, you still see like this huge forest of Melaleuca. And they're terrible. You cut them, you burn them, and they keep them growing. You bury them. It's like you can't stop them. You know,
Are
they just
used
grow.
for anything? Are they used in the paper industry or anything?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Yes.
How is Everglades Foundation funded? How many full-time people are?
Yes, we are funded completely by private donors. We don't take any public dollars, and we have about almost 40 people on staff. Between this, we have a team of 7 scientists, including hydro engineers, a chief economic officer to understand how the clean water economy impacts us all. We have people who work in modeling, so a lot of this is like water models to understand if we do this to the water, what happens here and what happens to this species. So they're running big models to understand how water management and water quality will impact not only the habitats, but also our urban environment. And then we have the education team also. They're out there all across Florida, training teachers. And then our advocacy team that works at the federal and the state level, and the communications team. Yes.
So the farmland that you said is the buffer between the Everglades down south and the bay. If farmlands are using pesticides, is that, it would seem to me, I'm a native plant gardener, that would be going into the bay.
It is, there are issues, and obviously, you know, it's not like our issue that we work with. Maybe Miami Waterkeeper would be able to answer more of those questions, but, you know, it's still better than paving over it, is what I understand, you know, and I know some tree farmers in Homestead that only work with native plants, and it's so much better, you know, because you don't need as many pesticides, because you don't need as much water, because they hold them better when there's hurricanes coming, you know, like there's just a myriad of benefits to having native plants. And one thing to remember is, like, if you guys have homes in your own yards, like, remember during the summer, during the wet season, do not use pesticides in your own lawn, because that just gets all right into our aquifer and into our bay. Yes.
I just want to add, because I am
Go
a
ahead.
very native plant gardener.
Yeah.
If you have native plants, you don't need pesticides at all, because if you bring nature back as it should be, there's a balance. I've seen the native insects come in and eat the invasive insects. So I haven't used pesticides ever in my garden. You can see my yard, it looks like I live in the forest. So
I love it.
you're welcome to come see it. Plant natives don't use pesticides at all.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a lot of education still to go. I mean, I still tell people, like, you know, it's the summer, you're not supposed to be doing that. They're like, what? I haven't heard of that. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it. Yes.
I know years ago we voted as a group to put aside money to buy the lands.
Amendment 1,
It
yes.
seems to me it's mostly legislative that we have problems with. We need more lawyers and we need more push to have that happen. I don't think it's happening already.
So the Amendment 1 is something that Floridians voted on, which was basically a penny, I think, it's a real estate sale tax. So every time you buy or sell a property, some funding goes to purchasing public lands. That has been very helpful for restoration. Absolutely, a lot of funding out of Amendment 1 has gone into restoration. Recently, I don't know if you guys have been seeing, there's a Florida corridor as well, the wildlife corridor. So some of the lands have been purchased through that. Some have been through partnership with ranchers and people who own the land, and they just basically say that they're not going to develop it any further. They have an agreement with the government. But yeah, I mean, for a long time, we were fighting to make sure that that money could also be used for this, and people want to divert it all the time. And that's why it's important to have organizations that are watchdogs and that are keeping track of what's happening in each legislative session and keeping an eye on it. Yes.
When the Army Corps is scoping their projects, how involved is the Everglades Foundation with them? And secondly, how much are they spending on that Everglades agricultural area restoration?
The reservoir, I think it's like $3 billion.
Crazy.
Yes, something like that. Basically, there's the Army Corps and then there's the South Florida Water Management District. So they're the two government agencies, one is the federal, one is the state, that build this project. The South Florida Water Management District, the state is in charge of cleaning the water. So they're in charge of the wetlands, the stormwater treatment areas, and the Army Corps of Engineers is in charge of the reservoirs, and they're also in charge of Lake Okeechobee. So they're the ones who decide, who pull the levers and decide where the water is going when. We are very involved. We've been at this for 30 years, and we really have a seat at the table. We bring in our own modeling, we make our own recommendations, not only about the projects, but also about how to manage the projects. Because once you build them, you also have to manage the water. And how is it going to be managed? Is there going to be more water for agriculture? Or is there going to be more water for urban areas? Or is there going to be more water for the Everglades, right? So there's a balance that the Army Corps is constantly working with for all this interest, because we all need water. It's all of our water, right? So we're there making sure that the models benefit the Everglades, that they benefit us in South Florida, and that we're kind of trying to get our fair share as much as possible. But yeah, thankfully, it's been a long relationship. We have a really good relationship with the Corps right now, and a really good relationship with the South Florida Water Management District as well. For a long time, it wasn't like that. The South Florida Water Management District Board was all, for lack of a better way of putting it, sugar people in there. It's changed. Now there's people that care, people that have been appointed. It's been night and day from what it used to be. But yeah, we work very closely with the district and with them.
So it's 3.9 billion.
3.9.
So almost
Yeah.
4 billion.
Yes, it's the largest project that the Corps has ever done. It's a big deal. This doesn't happen every day, and states are fighting for these dollars. States also need to restore their own wetlands and create reservoirs to collect water. And this is so important. I mean, we're seeing the water issues that we're having in the West, in Colorado and Arizona there. And it's lack of planning. It's lack of understanding who's going to need water, when, how much are we growing. I mean, in Arizona, they keep on building like crazy, and no one's thinking ahead of what's going to happen. So we are in a good position right now, but it's still going to be until probably 2030 or a little longer until these projects are actually done and functioning. And then it's going to be protecting the ecosystem and then making sure that it's managed properly as well. Any other questions? Yes.
Is there a group that has been able to take some of the animals that are reigning in the Everglades to repopulate them, to be able to put them back so they don't become extinct?
No, it's not. I don't know.
Panthers.
Panthers, the little rabbits,
Yeah.
all the mammals.
I don't know about bringing them back. I can tell you a little bit about, some animals, like for example, the wading birds, they made somewhat of a comeback. During the early 20th century, it was the plume trade. So people would come in here and they would kill hundreds of birds in a rookery. Flamingos, they basically finished the flamingo population in South Florida. Roseate spoonbills, the egrets, all for putting feathers in ladies' hats, and that was crazy. And now we're starting to see the wading bird population kind of come back. They really need the water levels to be correct for them to be able to breed and prosper. But I don't know specifically of anyone bringing the animal. I've heard about that, like in Africa.
They store seeds. I mean, there's
Yes, yeah. Well, with plants probably, but I don't know about animals. I've never heard of that.
The Florida panther population was so big that they brought in cougars and other similar related animals from different parts of the South and brought them in to add more diversity to the gene pool, because they were so inbred that they were starting to be born with defects and things. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm also not sure about the king-table seaside sparrow. Any bird people know? If
Yeah.
anything like that. I'm not sure, but
I'm a bird person, but I haven't
yeah, it was it's also a super low population, but the panthers are a good example of that, where they brought in individuals from outside of the system to add in more.
To the gene pool because they were just being
You
born
know,
sick.
they found a big flock of flamingos down in the lake, so that's really nice.
I know, I heard it's been crazy. After decades and decades, we've been seeing flamingos because of El Nino and hurricanes in Mexico. So there's populations that we've been seeing here after decades of not seeing flamingos. Yes. Yes, yes. So the snail kites are interesting because they used to eat the apple snails in the Everglades, which the population was also almost gone out of, all of this water mess. But then there was an invasive snail that came in that was a bigger snail, and nobody knew what was going to happen. But then the snail kites started eating that invasive snail, and it was crazy because it was evolution in front of our eyes. We started seeing how the snail kites big change and became a little bigger to eat the bigger invasive snail. So there's one good story about invasive species there that in the end ended up working out. Yes.
On the 10 individual bridges, was there original plan for a larger span and it was reduced? Like how many miles of flowway is there?
I'm not sure. I know it's 3 miles right now. It's 3 bridges, 1 mile, 1 mile, 1 mile. And if you go there now, they're still working on it. They're building culverts in some of the areas so that the water can go under. But yeah, someone might remember when it was happening.
I was going to say the Miccosukee were adamant about not allowing that bridge to come in, only because they wanted to see what happened with part of it, because they had been able to clean a lot of their section of water. They didn't want to pollute it, but I think they've seen that it's working, so they're allowing more.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, the Everglades are home to 2 tribes, the Miccosukee and the Seminole tribe, and they're also parties in all of this. They are also involved in restoration. We work with them in some issues, in some they work on their own. We do advocacy in some areas, and they live there. Is their home. So they are also beneficiaries of restoration. Yes.
I'll ask you a question. If South Florida didn't have a horrific requirement for water, fresh water, drinking water, what would be the status of the Everglades?
Right. If it wasn't the urban interests or the urban needs, you mean? Yeah. I mean, honestly, when we go and advocate for this funding, there's some people that you can talk to about nature and birds, and some people that really don't care, and that's why we have people studying the economics of it. That's why we need to understand how our urban areas are connected. But more and more, we are realizing that we need nature for us to survive, and that a lot of these need to be nature-based solutions that work best. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's Florida, right? We have usually Republican governors. We have, economic interests. We need to make sure that we have the arguments on both sides. You don't need to convince environmentalists of saving birds. They're already there. So you need to convince the other people. You need to convince the business owners that they need the water as well. I'm not sure what would happen if we weren't all here.
I'm on the education team at the Everglades Foundation, so I was here to support Begoñe. But in the 1940s, when there were projections for urban planning, it was estimated that in the year 2000, only about 2 million people would live in South Florida.
Funny, right?
Is that it was close to 7 million people. So our infrastructure just isn't in place to handle the amount of people who live here and use all of these resources like water and land that we have here. So it would have been very differently if the future projections included perhaps development and more use of air conditioning, right? And like mosquito repellent, things that really allow Florida, Miami to like boom, to have more people to move here. I guess in the 40s, no one really thought that things would change very much.
That anybody wanted to come here. Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly, there's no air conditioning. And while I have the floor, I'm going to plug the education programs. Begoñe, thank you. we have a free Everglades curriculum, pre-K through 12. It's standard aligned. We offer free professional development, and everything that we do is hosted on our website. So you can find it either through the Everglades Foundation website, or we have our own, which is evergladesliteracy.org. So free, like I can say it again, free. Our curriculum is easily accessible. You don't need a code or anything to use it. We have a team of 7 educators across the state of Florida who have worked with over 6,000 teachers in 30 different school districts. So we're really proud of our impact. I myself grew up here in Miami, and I'm a product of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and I think I had a great education, but Everglades education just wasn't part of it, like a lot of people can relate to. And so now that I'm on the other end of it, working with teachers, I really understand how important it is for teachers to talk about it in the classroom, because 90% of students get their environmental education in the classroom. And so we need to better equip our educators to be able to comfortably talk about what Begoñe talked about, and make it make sense for learners of all ages.
Yes, if you know any teachers or any, after school activities, it's like really fun curriculum. Homeschool, anyone can access it, and according to their grade. And different languages too, Spanish resources. Okay. And I'll be here for any questions. Thank you. And I actually lied, I do have my giveaway, so if anybody wants some Everglades Foundation hats, you just have to come say hi and grab one.
It's from a great thing.
Yes.